Some families passed down heirlooms. Ours passed down silence. It was the kind that lived in the walls, under the carpet, even in the light that fell across the kitchen floor. You could walk through our house and feel it wrap around you, polite and suffocating. I was 8 when Mom told me never to touch the good dishes. They sat behind the glass cabinet in the dining room, porcelain white with a thin gold trim that caught the light like a secret. "They're for special occasions," she said, but there never were any. We had paper plates, chipped mugs, forks that bent in the dishwasher. But those dishes, they gleamed like untouched promises. Every time I passed that cabinet, I saw my reflection staring back at me through the glass, and it felt like I was looking at the person I was supposed to become. Quiet, careful, untouchable. Mom was good at keeping things still. The house had a rhythm to it, her steps, the low hum of the refrigerator, the clock ticking toward nothing. Dad worked in the garage fixing cars, smelling of oil and heat. When they argued, which was often, they did it in coded tones. Words like fine and whatever you think that meant everything but peace. One night I heard her cry in the kitchen. I peeked out and saw her sitting at the table, a wine glass half full, the good cabinet glinting behind her. She stared at those dishes like she was waiting for them to speak. They never did. Years passed and I learned to inherit her silence. It fit me like a second skin. I stopped asking questions. I stopped expecting special occasions. When I turned 18, I left home for a job 2 towns over. I told myself it was freedom, but even in my new apartment, I'd catch myself polishing things that didn't need polishing, keeping quiet when I wanted to scream. Then Mom died. Quick, sudden, a stroke, they said. I came home to a house that smelled like dust and medicine. Dad didn't say much. He just sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall clock, the one she'd always hated. We didn't talk about her funeral. We didn't talk about anything. He told me to take whatever I wanted. I took a framed photo of her smiling on the porch, the one that used to hang by the door. I looked at the cabinet, the dishes untouched, and for the first time I thought about opening it. But Dad was there, and something in his silence warned me not to. He remarried the next year. Cheryl. She wore her hair too blonde, her perfume too loud. She called me sweetheart, like she was testing how far she could push me before I'd flinch. I tried to make it work. I really did. I visited every Sunday, cooked dinner, made small talk. Cheryl laughed too hard, talked too much, and rearranged everything, even the photos of Mom. One day I noticed the cabinet was gone. I found it in the garage, sitting between a broken lawnmower and boxes of Christmas decorations. Dust had gathered on the glass. The dishes were still inside, but they looked dull, like even they had given up. Something twisted in me. I told myself it didn't matter, they were just plates. But that night, I dreamed of Mom standing in front of the cabinet again, whispering something I couldn't hear. When I woke up, I could still feel the weight of her disappointment pressing against my chest. Life kept moving in its slow, merciless way. I worked, saved a little, drifted. Cheryl filled Dad's world with scented candles and pity parties. He seemed smaller every time I saw him, like he was fading out of his own house. Then came the diagnosis, pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, the doctor said the story was already written. I moved back home. Cheryl made a show of caring, posting sympathy quotes online, cooking half-edible casseroles, calling herself his rock. But at night, when the house went quiet, I was the one emptying vomit bowls, checking oxygen levels, begging him to hold on just a little longer. He never said much. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at the cabinet through the garage door window, like he remembered something he couldn't reach. One night, he told me Mom used to want to take those dishes out for Christmas dinner. I told her not to, he said softly. Didn't want to risk breaking them. And there it was, the story of their whole marriage. Keeping things safe, unbroken, unused. He died on a Tuesday. Cheryl wasn't home. She said the smell of antiseptic made her anxious. I sat beside him, holding his hand as the monitor flattened into silence. I thought I'd cry, but there was nothing left in me to spill, just a hollow sound where love used to be. Afterward, I washed his hands, closed his eyes, and turned off the light. I sat in the dark and listened to the clock tick, the same one Mom hated, and felt something in me begin to thaw, slow and dangerous. The funeral was small, quiet. Cheryl wore black lace and fake tears. She told everyone how much she'd loved him, how devastated she was, and how grateful she felt that I'd been there to help with the messy parts. Messy parts. Like grief was just another household chore she didn't want to touch. People whispered condolences, patted her hand, said how strong she was. Nobody looked at me. I wasn't the widow, I was just the daughter, an extra body filling space. After everyone left, Cheryl poured herself a glass of wine and sighed. "You must be exhausted, sweetheart," she said. "He really depended on you." I nodded. I wanted to say something kind, something final, but my throat was tight. She smiled then, small, sharp. "He told me how proud he was of you," she said. "He said you didn't need much from anyone. You're independent," that word. Independent. It landed like a slap. 2 days later, she showed me the will. The house was hers. The savings, what little there was, hers. "He wanted me secure," she said. "He said you're doing fine on your own." I felt my pulse climb up my throat. My hands shook. I wanted to ask how he could say that when I'd quit my job to care for him, spent my savings on his meds, turned my life into his shadow. But I didn't ask, because silence was our inheritance, and I'd learned my part well. Instead, I just nodded, lips pressed tight enough to taste blood. She talked about redecorating, about maybe selling this old place and moving somewhere sunnier. "It's just too full of ghosts," she said. "Don't you think?" I wanted to tell her that ghosts weren't the problem, it was the living, but I said nothing. I washed the dishes, took out the trash, folded the sheets for the last time. That night when she went out to get some air, I wandered into the garage. The cabinet sat there, half hidden by boxes. Dust blanketed the glass. I wiped it away with my sleeve, and the porcelain shimmered faintly under the weak bulb. The gold trim caught the light just like it had when I was a child. Untouched, perfect. Waiting. I opened the cabinet. My reflection split in the glass. For a moment, I saw Mom's face instead of mine. Then I saw Cheryl's perfume bottle sitting on the workbench, leaking a little. Sweet and chemical, like her smile. I thought about all the dinners we never had, all the birthdays that passed without ceremony, all the times Mom said not tonight when I asked if we could eat off the good plates. And now, standing there in that stale garage, I realised something. There were never any special occasions because she'd been waiting for permission. From him. From life. From some invisible rule that said joy had to be earned. The next morning I woke up early and made breakfast for Cheryl and me. She came downstairs in her robe, surprised. "What's this?" "Thought I'd cook something nice," I said. She smiled that sugary smile. "You're sweet, sweetheart." We ate in silence. I watched her chew, sip, sigh. Every movement felt like an invasion, like she'd walked into a memory and was rearranging the furniture. After breakfast, she started talking about selling the garage cabinet online. Vintage porcelain, might fetch a few hundred, she said. "It's just taking up space." Something inside me cracked. Just a hairline fracture, invisible but deep. I said nothing. I cleaned the plates, packed my bags quietly. I told her I'd leave by the end of the week. She said she was glad I was taking time for myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air felt too still, too heavy. I walked to the garage, barefoot. The floor was cold, the light harsh. I stood in front of the cabinet, opened it again and touched one of the plates. It was cold, too. Cold like something that had never been loved. I carried one dish into the kitchen and set it on the table, then another, and another. By the time I was done, the table looked like a museum exhibit. White porcelain, gold trim, memories that never happened. I thought about Mom's hands, thin, tired, always busy. I thought about Dad's silence, his refusal to let beauty live in the house. I thought about Cheryl, sleeping in their bed, dreaming of real estate listings. And I thought about myself. The daughter who waited her whole life for permission to break something. I went to the fireplace, scooped out the cold ashes, bits of burned paper, bills, pamphlets, cigar butts. I filled each plate with a little mound of grey, like serving courses of regret. The smell of smoke rose slowly, curling through the air. When I was done, I sat down at the table and stared. The plates gleamed faintly under the kitchen light, gold edges glowing like halos around the ruin. I waited for Cheryl to come home. She walked in an hour later, humming. The smell hit her first. She froze. "What are you doing?" I looked up, calm, almost smiling. "Serving dinner on the good dishes." She blinked. Her lips parted, but no words came. The air between us thickened. For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition. Like she just realized the silence in this house wasn't empty. It was full of teeth. I told her I'd stay one more month. I told her I'd clean the house, settle the bills, pack slowly. She didn't argue. Maybe it was the tone of my voice. Maybe it was the sight of those plates, the grey ashes curling up like ghosts from the past. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat at the table until morning, watching the ashes settle. Morning came pale and unforgiving. The kitchen smelled like smoke and memories. Cheryl avoided me, tiptoeing around the house like she was afraid to wake something sleeping in the walls. She left early, said she had errands, which probably meant brunch and gossip. I watched her car back out of the driveway and disappear down the street. Then I opened the windows and let the cold air roll in. The plates were still on the table. Ash settled into the gold trim like dust in a wound. I stood there, staring at them, wondering if this was what Mom had felt, wanting something beautiful and being too afraid to touch it. I picked up one of the dishes. The porcelain felt fragile but solid, like a secret that had waited too long to be told. I washed it gently, the grey water swirling down the drain, and for a moment I imagined washing away years of silence. It didn't work, of course. Silence doesn't rinse out, it seeps into the cracks and waits. That day I started sorting through Dad's things. The garage was a museum of his habits, half-finished projects, rusted tools, oil stains that would never fade. I found an old box labelled Mom. Inside were recipes in her looping handwriting, yellowed photos, and a single folded note. It was addressed to me. The paper had aged, soft at the edges, like it had been waiting for my hands. "If you ever find this," it said, "don't wait your whole life for someone to tell you when it's okay to use the good dishes. The world doesn't give permission for happiness. You take it, and when you do, don't be gentle." I sat there on the concrete floor, the letter trembling between my fingers. My throat burned. I wanted to scream, to throw the note, to ask her why she never said it out loud. But then I realised maybe she didn't know how. Maybe she only learned it when it was too late. I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket. It felt heavy, heavier than paper should. That evening, Cheryl came home smelling like perfume and champagne. She stopped short when she saw me sitting at the table again. "Still here?" she said. "Still here?" She forced a smile. "You should get out more, sweetheart. Do something for yourself. You've been so intense." I looked at her, really looked. At the lines around her mouth, the smudge of lipstick on her teeth, the faint desperation beneath her practiced calm. She was the kind of woman who thought control was safety, who wore charm like armour. Maybe we weren't so different, except I'd finally run out of armour. "Do you ever wonder," I asked, "what it feels like to be used and never seen?" She blinked. "Excuse me?" "Never mind," I smiled. "You wouldn't understand." That night she locked her bedroom door. I heard the click. It made me laugh. Soft, bitter. I wasn't dangerous, not really. I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted her to feel what it meant to live in a house built on silence. Over the next few weeks, I stayed true to my word. I cleaned, organised, packed boxes. Cheryl grew quieter, unsure how to act around me. Once I caught her staring at the good cabinet, now empty, as if she could sense that something sacred had shifted. One afternoon, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, one of the dishes in front of her. She traced the gold edge with her fingertip. "These are beautiful," she said softly. "I didn't realise." I watched her for a long moment. There was something almost human in her voice, something uncertain. "They were my mother's," I said. She nodded. "You should take them. I don't want to sell them anymore." The offer surprised me. Maybe it was guilt, maybe superstition. Maybe she'd finally realised some things aren't meant to be bought or boxed away. "Thank you," I said. She smiled faintly. "I guess they're your heirloom now." Heirloom. The word felt wrong in my mouth. What I'd inherited wasn't porcelain, it was restraint, obedience, silence. But maybe I could change what that meant. Maybe I could finish what Mom started. That night after Cheryl went to bed, I took one plate from the cabinet, the one that had always caught the light just right. I wrapped it carefully in a towel and put it in my bag. When morning came, I told Cheryl I was leaving. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, pretending not to care. "Where will you go?" "Home," I said. She frowned. "This is home." "Not anymore." I walked past her, down the steps, out into the pale sunlight. The house looked smaller from the outside, like it had already begun to forget me. I drove for hours without a destination, just the road, the plate, and the letter in my pocket. I ended up at a diner off the highway, cheap coffee, cracked vinyl booths, the kind of place where nobody asks questions. I sat there for a long time watching strangers come and go, couples arguing, truckers laughing, waitresses moving like clockwork. Life, loud and unashamed. When the waitress asked if I was waiting for someone, I almost said yes, but I wasn't. Not anymore. The diner emptied out as the afternoon light softened into gold. I stayed in the corner booth, tracing the rim of my coffee cup the way Cheryl had traced that plate. My reflection rippled in the dark liquid, half of me here, half still back in that house. When I finally stepped outside, the air smelled like rain. I sat in my car, turned the plate over in my hands, and noticed a faint crack running through the porcelain. A hairline fracture, almost invisible. It hadn't been there before. For a second, I thought I'd ruined it. But then I saw how the crack caught the light, how the imperfection made it real. It wasn't broken. It was alive. I drove to the lake where Dad used to take me fishing. The water was still, glassy, the surface unbroken except for a few drifting leaves. I parked by the shore, wrapped the plate in the towel again, and carried it down to the edge. There was no ceremony, no speech. I just knelt in the mud and washed it in the lake. The ashes that had clung to it, tiny grey flecks, floated away. For a moment I imagined they were pieces of my parents, dissolving into the water, finally released. When I pulled the plate back out, the gold trim gleamed faintly against the dusk. I could almost hear Mom's voice. "Don't be gentle." I laughed. It startled me, that sound, raw, sharp, real. I took the plate home with me, to my home, the small apartment I'd left behind when Dad got sick. The furniture was dusty, the fridge empty, but the air felt clean. I put the plate on a shelf in the kitchen, right above the sink. Not locked away behind glass, not waiting for an occasion, just there. That first night back, I cooked dinner for myself. Nothing special, just pasta and cheap wine. I ate it off one of my old plates, but I kept looking up at the good one shining quietly in its new place. For the first time, it didn't look like an heirloom, it looked like a witness. In the weeks that followed, I started working again. Not at my old job. I didn't want to go back to the same quiet grind that had kept me numb for years. I took shifts at a bookstore, part-time. It felt good, handling stories instead of bills, voices instead of silence. Sometimes customers would ask if I lived alone. I'd say yes. They'd give that pity smile people give when they think solitude is a wound. But I didn't mind. Solitude was clean, predictable, mine. I thought I'd left Cheryl behind, but grief doesn't respect distance. She called a few times, voicemails, long and syrupy. "Just checking in, sweetheart." I never called back. One message ended with her crying softly, saying she couldn't stand how empty the house felt. For a moment, I almost pitied her, but then I remembered the will, the perfume, the way she'd said independent like it was a flaw. She'd inherited the house. I'd inherited the silence. But only one of us knew how to live with it. One evening, I lit a candle and sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer. I took out Mom's letter again. The paper had grown softer from being unfolded so many times. I read it slowly, like prayer. "Don't wait your whole life for someone to tell you when it's okay to use the good dishes. You take it, and when you do, don't be gentle." That was her confession, I realized. Her apology, her rebellion. And maybe this, my life now, was mine. I started using the plate on Fridays. It became a ritual. I'd cook something simple, roasted chicken soup, sometimes just eggs, and eat from it like it was the most ordinary thing in the world, because that's what it was supposed to be, ordinary. Not sacred, not locked away, just living. One night, a friend from the bookstore came over for dinner. Her name was Laura. We'd stayed late talking after closing, both too tired to go home. I invited her without thinking, and she said yes. We cooked together. Badly, laughing the whole time. I didn't tell her about the plate at first, but when we sat down, she noticed it on the shelf. "That's beautiful," she said. "Is it old?" I looked at it for a long time before answering. "Yeah!" I said, "But it's still good." We ate, talked, drank too much wine, and at some point I realized I was smiling without effort. The room was full of sound, clinking glasses, laughter, music leaking from someone's window upstairs. It felt like oxygen. After she left, I sat at the table alone again. The candle had burned low. I looked at the good dish, catching the flicker of flame, and felt something in me settle. It wasn't peace. It was something stronger, ownership. That night, I dreamed of Mom again. She wasn't sad this time. She was standing in the kitchen, wearing her old blue dress, the one she used to save for special occasions. She was setting the table, her movements calm and deliberate. She looked at me and smiled, and for the first time I heard her voice clearly. "It's okay," she said. "Eat." When I woke, sunlight was spilling across the counter. The plate glowed in it, cracked, imperfect, beautiful. I made breakfast, toast, coffee, a little jam, and this time I used the good dish. The porcelain felt warm beneath my hands. When the knife scraped the surface, it made a soft ringing sound like something breaking free. I ate slowly, savouring every bite. There was no occasion, no guests, no rules. Just me. And when I finished, I didn't wash the plate right away. I left it on the table, crumbs and all, letting it sit in the light. Because some heirlooms aren't meant to be preserved, they're meant to be finished.